welcome friends. There's enough of you I can look you in the eye, right? So that was an original song. We apologize. I'll try to look that up while we're doing the presentation. It was emailed to us here at the museum prior to the 50th this summer. An original composition, obviously paying tribute to William Medley. So we'll want to make sure we acknowledge the artist who created that. A little backstory on all of this. First of all, I know there's a small group, but make it loud. Thank Vangie O'Neil for coming in and doing the research on William and Joy. Just show her some love. Shower, Kat, you too. Here at the museum, we've been marking the experiences of the 72 flood all summer long, but we've done it for several years in my tenure here as executive director. And one of the challenging history stories is Joy's role in the flood and trying to find information out about Joy. And somewhere along the line, along with this song coming in, Joy's daughter brought in some photo albums, which we brought down here to share with you. And a woman that I think there might have maybe been one or two pictures of, suddenly we were able to find out who was Joy Medley, what was some of the things that happened there. Vangie, our special speaker here, this is her second winter. Her and her husband Jerry relocated here. The Salvation Army marks their years in Christmas, because of all their activities, which starting today, the red kettles are out and the bells are ringing, right, ladies? So we won't forget that either. But no bells ring. I'll ring the bell for you. How's that sound? So Vangie worked through the Salvation Army Museum and through parts of these items that we have here to really create this story, and we're recording it here today because I think it's important that once we get these hidden pieces of history recorded, specifically of interest to me is history of women in our communities. It tends to get overshadowed at times, and I don't know if that's been part of the challenge of Joy's story or not. I know Vangie's going to shed a lot of light on that. So this is really for the museum. This has been a conversation that we've been having for multiple years, and I can't be grateful enough for Vangie and the Salvation Army team for collaborating with us. I wish we had 100 people here today, but we're going to record it. We're going to make sure it's part of our flood history archives going forward. Along the lines of future programs, we'll take a little break at Thanksgiving. I know the Salvation Army won't, but we're going to take a little break. That Friday after, December 2nd, Jim Kenyon from Catholic Social Services will be here. And that program will be about Father William O'Connell, who was also a huge part of the 1972 flood experience. And the things that he did helped lead to a lot of change, not only just here in Rapid City in South Dakota, but across the world. And so, again, that's a story that I think that we want to make sure gets developed as appropriate history that we should all be proud of in our community. But I'm going to turn the reins over to Vangie. Would you give her as big a round of applause as we can and thank her for coming here today?
First. I got it. Can you hear me now? All right. I won't say what Kat always says about me, that I got a big mouth. Well, I guess I just did. But it is a privilege to be able to share with you today. And there's so many stories from the 72 flood. It's amazing. And I hope that we continue to share them as often as we can. But I want to back up just a little bit and show a short video that gives a little bit of background on how the Salvation Army really got started in disaster relief work. So here we go.
During World War I, Salvation Army women volunteered and went straight to the front lines to make hot donuts and apple pie for the soldiers. They were nicknamed the Donut Girls, and the warm, tasty reminder of home they provided was greatly appreciated. When the Great Depression hit, the Salvation Army expanded their services of feeding lines and food distribution to provide more homeless shelters and lodging for the multitudes affected by poverty. Not only continuing the tradition of serving donuts in mobile canteens, Salvation
Mm-hmm.
Full disclosure, never happened once in the trial.
It gives you a chance to see how much stuff is in that picture. It is not happy. It's just spinning. Yep.
Can we force
Yep.
it to go back? Do you want to try and go back?
Survivors.
There you go. I think.
During World War I, Salvation Army women volunteered and went straight to
Sorry.
During World War I, Salvation Army women volunteered and went straight to the front lines to make hot donuts and apple pie for the soldiers. They were nicknamed the Donut Girls, and the warm, tasty reminder of home they provided was greatly appreciated. When the Great Depression hit, the Salvation Army expanded their services of feeding lines and food distribution to provide more homeless shelters and lodging for the multitudes affected by poverty. Not only continuing the tradition of serving donuts in mobile canteens, Salvation Army volunteers would often be found working in the field hospitals during World War II. The Salvation Army was the first relief organization to arrive at Ground Zero on September 11, 2001. During the next few months of recovery, they were able to serve a total of 3.2 million meals to first responders and other volunteers. When Hurricane Katrina hit, the Salvation Army mobilized more than 178 canteen feeding units and 11 field kitchens, which together served more than 5.7 million hot meals. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Salvation Army is still at work, serving around the clock and providing hope to those that need it most. In times of despair and in times of need, the Salvation Army has been there and will continue to, because hope is greater than fear.
That's a picture of one of the World War II canteens that I thought was fun. The Salvation Army of the United States has provided humanitarian and spiritual aid to disaster and emergency survivors for over 120 years. The Emergency Disaster Services Program, which we call EDS, because we love acronyms, but the program as we understand it today developed following World War II. So you can see these mobile canteens. Well, at the end of the war, the Army found itself with a fleet of mobile canteens in need of a new mission. Helping to feed those in need during times of crisis, providing supplies, offering spiritual comfort, that was already a part of our DNA, so it seemed perfectly natural to repurpose these World War II canteens so that they could continue to serve in times of need. The emergency canteens were soon engaged in some familiar activities. They were on site at major floods, fires, and even urban riots to provide food, hydration, spiritual care, and first aid to disaster survivors and before first responders. Now, what you probably don't know is that in 1970, now that's just 2 years before the flood, but before 1970, the Salvation Army Emergency Disaster Services operated with no federal money or support. So the Army was not able to muster the same amount of resources it can today. Hurricane Camille in 1969 was the catalyst for changing the status of the Salvation Army in the storm's aftermath. Senator Bay led a team to investigate the disaster response, and the committee's findings were incorporated into public law, which was passed in 1970 and recognized the Salvation Army as a bona fide emergency relief agency. So now, when an emergency, a national disaster is declared, the Salvation Army has the full resources of the federal government at its disposal. That includes military resources, manpower, equipment, food from government agencies, and access to federal buildings, housing, and more. The Army's position as a major disaster assistance agency was again strengthened by the Disaster Relief Act in 1974. This photo would not have happened if the flood had been a couple of years earlier. It helps to illustrate the difference that federal recognition made in the Army's ability to provide aid following a disaster. It shows an emergency canteen being unloaded from the United States Air Force cargo plane after the 1972 Black Hills flood. Before 1970, the Salvation Army could not command the sort of aid shown in this photo. You might be able to get the state-level resources, but the Air Force delivering canteens to a disaster site was out of the question. Being a federally recognized emergency relief agency meant that the Salvation Army can pull resources from anywhere in the country for a federally recognized disaster, and that the resources will arrive in time to have a significant impact on the lives of survivors and emergency responders. The Salvation Army can deploy resources, be they canteens, supplies, or people, wherever they are needed. That could be anywhere in the country, and with the approval from the Salvation Army International Headquarters, could be anywhere in the world. So, when disaster came to the Black Hills on June 9th, 1972, the Salvation Army was appointed by the OEP to handle all feeding and clothing for the distressed. And between June 9th and July 9th, 1972, the Salvation Army served 177,000 plus meals, supplied 4,400 plus cases of canned goods, over 20,000 pounds of potatoes, 5,300 loaves of bread, and 1,500 plus cases of baby food. As for clothing, the Salvation Army and volunteers distributed 180 tons of clothing and shoes, 2,000 cases of disposable diapers. And I forgot to flip the script. There we go. As for those now famous mobile canteens, they were able to serve a total of 1,599 hours, providing rescue workers with 39,249 sandwiches and 55,813 cups of coffee and cold drinks. And those volunteers included not just folks from the Salvation Army, but local community members. And you might notice in a lot of the pictures, it included a lot of teenagers. But those are the statistics. But the statistics do not go to the heart of the story, which is where we want to go. Perhaps these words of a resident drinking his coffee beside a mobile canteen and pointing to the devastation will give us some of the picture. He said, quote, "I had $80,000 in a home and car there a few days ago. And now all that I own are the clothes on my back, and these you people of the Salvation Army gave me." Maybe even more powerful is the case of the 14-year-old girl found standing alone by a silt-filled basement as Salvationists made their morning rounds. With tears streaming, she seemed to look without seeing as she told them that her parents were enjoying an evening at home when the water struck. She remained for a few days by that basement wall, all that was left of a formerly friendly world, until an Army captain could persuade her to go to a family for temporary lodging until she could find relatives. But I guess the real heart of the story for us at the Salvation Army is the stories of Majors William and Joy Medley. And for the next few minutes, I want to tell the Salvation Army's flood story from the words of Major Joy Medley. This is what she said. "Little did we realize what was in store for us this particular day. The rain kept coming down harder and harder. In fact, I never in my life have seen rain come down so hard and fast. We drove to the highway leading to the camp. Just at the top of the hill, National Guardsmen turned us back, saying the rain is coming down from the hill so hard it is washing cars off the road. Bill said, 'Well, honey, then we'd better get back because we might be needed.' So we went home. I immediately started making coffee and ham salad for sandwiches. Bill went to get supplies and to check and see where he could be of help. He returned shortly with the supplies and told me people are being evacuated from their homes because of the high water and they need places to stay out of the weather. So we decided to go to the Salvation Army building and offer our chapel for them to stay overnight, where it was warm and dry. We took our supplies and went to the Army building, which is located only half a block from Rapid Creek. I had contacted 3 other ladies from the Corps to come and help me. Bill left then and took our pickup truck to see where he was most needed. He came back in about a half an hour and called down the stairs to me, "Honey, I'm going to Storybook Island to help evacuate the people." I said, "Okay, be careful. I love you." He answered, "I love you too," and he was gone. As the women worked getting sandwiches and coffee ready, we could hear the torrential rain coming down outside. Subconsciously, I knew that if Bill was helping evacuate people, he must be in some danger. But I told myself, he's been in danger before, he'll be all right. Sometime later, someone called down the steps again, this time telling us that we had 5 minutes to get out of the building because the dam had broken. I felt responsible to get the 3 women to safety, but felt no fear as I prayed, "Lord, help us get out of here." I told the ladies to take what supplies they could, and we would still have to take care of the people. Then the lights went out and the whole city was in total darkness. 2 of the ladies panicked. They were both deathly afraid of water, saying they could not swim. One lady took a boot from the other one and tossed the bread that she was carrying into the water. Her daughter said to her, "Come on, Mother, let's get to the car." But she protested, saying, "But I can't swim." Somehow her daughter led her out of the building to the car. The other lady began to cry, "Help me, oh help me, I can't swim." I took her hand and said, "Don't you worry. You keep holding my arm and don't let go, and we'll get out of here all right." I had my hands full of supplies while she carried still the 1 boot, an umbrella, and her coat. We left the building in waist-deep water and got into the car. I had no idea that it might not start. I simply sat down and started the car, and we drove through the water to the corner. I kept praying all the time that God would help us get to safety. And always in the back of my mind was the question, where was Bill when the dam broke? I could only pray, "Lord, take care of him." At the corner, the current was so fast that another car floated by us as we drove across and started up the incline. Our car stalled and we had to get out and leave it, carrying still what supplies we could. We waded across the current, the water much higher than our waists. Gradually, we climbed out of the water. It was almost morning now, and we could see fires burning in the city. We could hear explosions and people screaming for help, but we could see nothing but the flames. All the while, I kept praying for Bill's safety, but somehow, God had told me that he had already taken him home. We finally arrived at the home of one of the ladies who lived in the part of the city not located near the creek. We immediately started again to make sandwiches and coffee. By 5 o'clock that morning, through the help of the mayor and others, I had set up a feeding station in the city auditorium. I knew by this time I had a lot of work to do, and Bill wouldn't be there to help me. Someone had brought me the word when the dam broke, Major was right there just below the dam. He had a child in his arms and people in the truck. He was hurrying to get them to dry ground. If Bill was just below the dam when it broke and was swept away by the water, he must have drowned. But a lot of people had to be taken care of, and I knew Bill would have said, "You're the only one to do it now." I just prayed for strength to do what had to be done. I worked all that night and the next day before they told me officially that my husband's body had been found. Then I kept on working because there were so many people who did not have clothing, food, or homes, and they needed my help. There was so much to be done, and only God gave me the strength to work through the night and days after Bill was gone. That is quite a story. Well, the work continued. But in the midst of all the cleanup, 1 week later, the community stopped on Sunday for a memorial service, which you can see up here. And it was led by clergy from all major denominations and faiths. A wreath was placed at the platform on behalf of the Salvation Army. And Mrs. Richard Nixon was there, sharing the common grief of the 7,000 to 8,000 citizens attending the service. She met with representatives of the organizations that worked in the area. Mrs. Nixon especially asked to meet Mrs. Medley. She thanked her for her valiant service and added, "You are a brave girl." She was a brave girl indeed. The following year, a lot of people don't know this, I live in a house that, if you could see this picture now, you would see the house. I live right by this memorial and did not know that's what it was until I started to do some of this research. But the following year, Major Joy Medley presented this outdoor chapel at the Salvation Army Black Hills Camp out on Thunderhead Falls Road. I'd love to tell you all about it if you're interested. It's an awesome place. It was dedicated as a place of solace during a service at the new chapel presided over by Dr. Carl Lutz, who was the Salvation Army's advisory board chairman, and other participants you may have heard of: Mayor Donald Barnett, U.S. Air Force Chaplain Major William Young, and then, of course, several Salvation Army headquarters personnel. I don't know if you were out to see the displays that were out at the, where were these displays? The monument. I would still want to call it the Civic Center. That's how you know I'm new in town, right? But we had the privilege of having a display out there, and this is a picture of the display that we had. And I'm thankful that I happened to be here during this 50th anniversary, because I literally knew nothing about this flood. I didn't even know it happened. I was 6 years old, living in Kansas at the time, and I never heard of it. But this past summer, the Salvation Army asked me to do this display, and this was our display, and I had to do a lot of research to get up to speed on what locals already knew. But it's been a great privilege and a humbling experience as well. I just want to catch you up a little bit more to the present of what the Salvation Army continues to do, and just in the area of emergency disaster services, because the Salvation Army here in the Black Hills has continued the great tradition of serving victims and first responders during times of tragedy. And many of these events, if you've been around for a while, you may remember, but you may not know that the Salvation Army was there with our canteen, serving food, providing cleanup kits, giving spiritual care. The Salvation Army was called out to serve after the Spencer tornado in 1998. And they were there in the Grizzly Gulch Fire. I love the names of these as well. The Grizzly Gulch Fire in 2002, serving breakfast and providing sack lunches on site to firefighters. Then in 2003, that must have been quite the year. The Red Point Fire, the Keystone Fire, the Little Elk Creek Fire. Salvation Army was busy that summer. And of course, this time of year, let's not forget about our winter disasters. There was the blizzard of 2008. And I think the little better known, the Atlas blizzard of 2013. The Salvation Army was able to come alongside so many others and provide assistance. I understand even serving Thanksgiving dinner to the ranchers who had lost all of their livestock, among other things. And there was the Pine Ridge flooding in 2019, where the Salvation Army provided food box, cleanup kits, vouchers, and some on-site feeding as well. And the Schroeder Fire of 2021. I love this post from the Johnson Siding Volunteer Fire Department. If you can't read it, it says, Schroeder Fire Update. Thank you to the Salvation Army and Black Hawk Fire Corps for providing food to firefighters on the lines. The Salvation Army remains committed to serving those in need, however suddenly that need may arise. But of course, you know that the Salvation Army does a lot more than drive around in canteens, serving food and drinks. We're busy all year round providing food boxes, clothing vouchers, household vouchers, utility assistance, toys for children at Christmas, worship services, Bible studies, men's programs, women's programs, children's programs, music programs, camping opportunities at our Black Hills Camp, programs and gifts for residents at area nursing homes, 2 thrift stores that provide reasonably priced items. We provide school supplies in the fall, coats for kids just before winter. And I probably missed a few. But we like to help. The Salvation Army is able to do these things because of such a generous community, members, awesome volunteers, and the example of officers like Majors William and Joy Medley, who led the way, who set an example of what it means to serve, no matter the cost. I do have a couple pictures that didn't show up in here that I got as recently as a couple hours ago, but one of them is they the picture of that camp, the memorial out at our campground, and the picture of the building, as you heard in the story, the building that the Salvation Army worked from was flooded, but the Salvation Army, after we got it cleaned up, stayed in that building for another 5 years before they finally got a new place. But there's a picture of that building over there on the table, as well as a flyer with all the statistics of things the Salvation Army did during the flood, and you're welcome to take those and look through. I was struck by the photo album that has clippings, newspaper clippings, of what happened, the Salvation Army Majors William and Joy Medley. You see we have a picture of William, and there's a little poem that was written for him as well. That hangs in our building at the Salvation Army. But it has been a struggle to find pictures of Joy. But there's some pretty good ones in that photo album that the Medley's daughter donated to the museum, and I was privileged to look through that. And the thing that struck me the most were all of the articles, newspaper articles from all over the country. It wasn't just South Dakota. I mean, East Coast, West Coast, every state just about has an article about the Salvation Army officer that gave his life during the flood. But even though we have the picture of William, I mean, he did give his life, and that's a pretty significant. But boy, Major Joy, what an example of dedication and service, and how she was able to have the fortitude to continue after the news that her husband had passed away. And I understand that she went down to identify the body and went right back to work. That's the only reason she stopped. I don't know how she did it, but I do know how she did it, because I serve the same God, and he is able to sustain us. So with that is what I have. But if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to attempt to answer them.
So I'll bring the microphone over to you, but I will share with you, Vangie, that I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Mayor Don Barnett. And if you didn't know this, you should know that Joy came to him within 24 hours of everything having happened, the chaos, and with the suggestion of let's serve meals over at what we now know as the Dolphin Arts Center. It was an auditorium back then. So it was her that went to Mayor Barnett and said, we can serve meals from here. You get me the food, I'll get the volunteers. So she was in action in hours of time there. While I walk over to the ladies, so I'll share the microphone so everybody can hear, and Vangie can hear you. I was curious, in your research, did you come across where William and Joy may have come from prior to Rapid City, or were they homegrown? Do you have a feel for that at all? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I've just always wondered.
Well, I don't know that, but I'll bet you that I did see some of that and sort of skipped over it. I'm sure I have that information somewhere. But, you know, it's traditional in the Salvation Army, we are moved within our territory. So the central 11 states is what we call the Central Territory. So they likely were from somewhere in the Midwest. And how long they were in this area or where they came before that, I'm not sure, but I could certainly find that out.
I would still like to know. All right, I'll walk over and I'll hand a microphone to anybody who's ready to ask a question. I saw hands up.
It's a real easy one. Do you know if she's still alive?
You know, I was scrambling to find out the answer to that today because I couldn't remember. I know her daughter lives in, I just lost it, I believe Colorado, and she was up here during the 50th anniversary and was very appreciative of the display that we had at the monument, but a little bit discouraged about the state of the memorial that's at the camp. So we've been working on that, and I'll be excited to get some plaques and things up so people know what it is, because I keep telling people there's no point in a memorial if it doesn't help you remember anything. So we're working on that right now, but I've had people, I'm still a little bit unsure if she's still alive. So I apologize for that. I've been trying to find out.
The other question is how'd they get across the creek to get to that building? Because the creek washed out all the bridges.
Well, I'm wondering if they were on the other side.
That's
at
only
the
half the time.
I don't know.
Where was the original Salvation Army building at? Do you know
At the
street?
time, the Salvation Army was located at 212 6th. There's a picture of it up here. What did you say was there?
I think it's kind of kitty corner from what is now Sentinel Federal Credit Union downtown, and there's like a haircut place there. When you guys look at it, you might be able to locate that. That was just, I'm not that real good.
But the Salvation Army was there in that building from 1950 to 1977. So it took them 5 years to get out of that flooded building. But apparently it was the basement that had most of the damage. The rest of the building, I guess, was somewhat usable for a little while.
The song Swept Away was created by Roger Pompab, who now lives in Bentonville, Virginia. I don't know if there's an indication that Joy is alive because he references in the song that he shared with the remaining family members, which was Gwen Medley Seidel
Right.
and her brother Herb. So that, while he doesn't say that Joy has passed, he said he shared it with the remaining family members, so he can be a little bit of a detective there and answer the question of who.
There you go.
And the title all at the same time. All right, how did it so far?
Sounds good to me.
All right, what other?
And I can play that song again when we're finished if people want to hear it again. It's pretty haunting.
Any other questions? We'll play the song, invite me to come to the table. Thank you for persevering with us as we start to get our feet back underneath of us with programs. I'll whisper the words turtle soup, trying to make it come back. Okay, so 2023 will be our lucky year. I know, everybody here is a turtle souper, so just say it.
I'm going to have to find out what that means.
You come to a program, it's history about people and places of the Black Hills with a bowl of soup. It's a big deal. Back to the world changed.
Love it.